My greetings to Her Excellency Minister Fatima Val-Swain, who's the new Minister of Mauritania. We welcome you, my sister, to this small but ever-increasing group of women in the AU. Honorable ministers and members of the Executive Council, I think I saw don't know where he's sitting, but I think he's here, His Excellency President Dlamini of Mozambique. Oh, there he is. A very warm greeting to him. Greetings to Your Excellency Carlos. We live in Addis, so we can't be calling each other by Carlos, Lopez. It's Carlos. Executive Secretary of the UNECA, Your Excellencies Erastus Mwenja, the Deputy Chair of the AU Commission, and fellow commissioners, honorable members of the PRC, ministers who have come from capitals, members of the diplomatic corps, officials, representatives of the AU organs and leaders of REX, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've not left anyone out. I want to repeat something I heard from one gathering I attended, that somebody was told that because there is no time, you must just say all protocol observed. And then he had never heard this term before. So when he got to the podium, he tried to remember what was said. And eventually he said, all potholes covered. So all protocol observed. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the AU headquarters once more for the 26th ordinary session of the Executive Council. And a very warm welcome to the new honorable ministers who have joined us, and we look forward to working very closely with them. I also want to wish all of you, since we're seeing most of you for the first time this year, a very happy new year, and hope that this year will be better than last year, and hope that all your wishes will be fulfilled with a bit of effort from all of us. I think we can. So, Happy New Year. Honorable ministers and distinguished guests, the annual report on the activities of the Commission of 2014 has been submitted for your consideration. It highlights the work that was done by the Commission since we last met on Agenda 2063 and steps undertaken with the REX and member states to accelerate continental integration and realize the aspirations of our peoples for a united, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its people and acting as a dynamic force in global affairs. After 2 years of consultations with civil society, the diaspora, the citizens, the experts, planners, governments, member states, REX, AU organs, we are presenting Agenda 2063 for adoption by the summit this year. We will also report on the work in progress with regards to the first 10-year plan, Agenda 2063, so that we can be ready for adoption at the June summit. Soon after the summit, we shall convene a meeting of the REX, sectorial experts, civil society and planners from member states to do more work on the 10-year plan, as well as process of integration and domestication of Agenda 2063 in national and regional development plans. The work on the 10-year plan means a concerted shift towards focusing on implementation of the Continental vision. A number of critical issues arise from this, which we would like to bring to the attention of the executive. Firstly, as mandated by Malabo, we have done work on the Agenda 2063 flagship projects, which will be covered in the report of the BADA Ministerial Follow-up Committee. These flagship integration projects, such as single aviation markets, the Grand Inga Dam and for energy and other energy projects, Pan-African University, the high-speed rail and network, and Pan-African e-network, the Continental Free Trade Area, the African Passport and Commodity Strategy, the Malabo Plan on Agriculture, should form the basis of this 10-year plan and must signal decisive movement in areas of continental priority. The centrality of human development and security in all of this cannot be overestimated. As we are learning the hard lessons from the Ebola virus outbreak on the need to have resilient public health systems and for integrated responses. Secondly, we will review the capacity required for the implementation of Agenda 2063. Because if we don't attend to that, we will not be able to implement it. We have agreed with the African Capacity Building Foundation that they will do a study for us quickly that will include the institutional capacities required at all levels, at member states level, REC and AU, as well as civil society. It also includes looking at a broader African human resource context, the technical, professional, and other skills, but especially in the areas of science, technology, engineering, research, project management, and innovation. And these would be critical for the implementation of the flagship projects, but also for Agenda 2063 as a whole. In the areas where we have skills deficit, we have to take continental and regional approaches, such as we are doing through the Pan-African University, our focus on virtual education, and also draw on our diaspora. We will continue engagement with the African University, vocational and private sectors on these issues, such as at the Higher Education Summit in Dakar in March this year. Thirdly, we must assess the institutional appropriateness of the current AU structures, processes, and working methods for the implementation of Agenda 2063. Work has started on a comparative study between the AU and other similar regional organizations. In addition, we must also look at rationalization of work between the AU Commission, the NEPAD agency, and the RECs, so that we have more efficient division of labor, complementarity in the implementation of Agenda 2063. And of course, even our working methods have to be looked at, because the RECs tend not to have a say and engagement in these meetings. They tend to be observers. But if they are indeed our building blocks for this integration, maybe they should have a greater participation and I think we should look at that in our closed meeting. Fourthly, integration remains central to our continental vision. We are encouraged by ongoing initiatives within and across regions to accelerate infrastructure development and agreements implemented on free trade zones or the free movement of people and goods. And I must commend particularly ECOWAS and East African community in this regard, because they are really leading on the issue of movement of people and goods. I was very excited when we had our meeting in Johannesburg about the progress ECOWAS has made and how they are going to move forward, moving now from a common passport to a common identity for all ECOWAS members. So I think other RECs should also be looking at accelerating this part. We will also present a comprehensive report on the state of integration in the context of Agenda 2063 to the June summit for discussion, with lessons from the different RECs as well as areas requiring a concerted push. Fifthly, we shall continue to highlight domestic resource mobilization as a critical success factor to ensure predictable funding of our institutions and programs, ranging from funding of elections, integration, project preparation for infrastructure and implementation of the African mining vision, to mention a few. The report of the Ministers of Economy and Finance on alternate sources of funding will serve before the summit, and our sister Minister Ngozi will be here too as the chair of the Ministers of Finance. In addition, the upcoming meeting of the Ministers of Economy and Finance meeting in March will be looking at Agenda 2063, and of course, because it's a meeting of planning ministers, it's a meeting of finance ministers and governors of reserve or central banks, it's important that they begin to look at Agenda 2063 themselves and see how it can be implemented. And of course, here in Addis later in the year, we will be hosting, Ethiopia will be hosting the conference on financing, global conference on financing. So I think it's important that our ministers of finance also look at this so that they are able to have, even if it's not a strictly producing a common vision for that conference, but just to exchange views so that by the time they go to that financing conference, they've exchanged ideas amongst themselves. So that meeting will be taking place in March. And Excellencies, as we prepare for the implementation of Agenda 2063 at all levels, as governments, RECs, and civil society, we have to pay special attention to the risks, both internal and external risks, and that we face on the road to the implementation of Agenda 2063. The detailed Agenda 2063 transformation framework mentions some of those risks, including the grave risk if we fail to silence the guns, neutralize the threats of terrorism, intolerance and extremism, slow movement on integration on infrastructure, and diversification of our economies due to both internal and external weaknesses and challenges. And the largest risk, failure to amass the financing for development. But it's not enough to identify the risks. We must go the next step and say, what are we going to do to mitigate these risks? And therefore, we hope that at the next executive session before the June summit, we will be able to look at these risks and how to mitigate them before the adoption of the 10-year plan. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the population projections estimates that by the time we celebrate the first centenary of the founding of the OAU, AU Africa, we will be the most youthful continent in the world. And I'm sure most of us will be there during that celebration. And I've said many times before that these projections must be used as an opportunity to urgently scale up investing in our people, especially our young people, to prepare them to assume a leadership role in all aspects of human endeavor, especially in entrepreneurship, in science, innovation, technology, in politics. And this we can achieve. And I think we must always look at the example of the internet. Africans, young men and women, have wholly embraced the revolution in the technologies of information. Many have become innovators and entrepreneurs in this area. Across the continent, opening an internet school or cyber cafe or developing a mobile application have become the first order of business for many young entrepreneurs, as well as a job provider for many more looking for a job. Unfortunately, the youth have said to us that one of their biggest handicaps is access to startup capital. And this remains a big obstacle across the continent. There are pockets of success where young people are assisted, but this is one of the areas that we have to look at for both youth and women. And of course, we must do more and better for African youth. Our report on the activities of the Commission outlined a number of measures for your consideration, including increasing investments in education in science and technology, skills development through vocational training, better treatment of teachers, not to mention lowering the cost of access to internet services and expanding internet coverage to enable virtual education in order to massify access to further and higher education. This summit should also consider some of the recommendations that came out of the Ouagadougou Plus 10 process. Notwithstanding that there'll still be a summit, but it's important to look at what we can do today to create jobs for young people. The measures aimed at giving our young people a stake in their countries and continent are the surest way also of tackling African youth migration, trafficking, and I really think we are allowing modern form of slavery in this human trafficking. It's nothing more than just slavery. And of course, they also fall prey to extremists. So on the whole, there's much that remains to be done on the socio-economic front. But I'm encouraged by the progress we have realized, particularly on some of the key Millennium Development Goals, including access to education, reduction of maternal and infant mortality, reduction of poverty, and the progress we're making on gender equality. But more still needs to be done. Ladies and gentlemen, the AU efforts for peace, stability, and the consolidation of democracy and good governance are also paying off through the African Peace and Security Architecture, working closely with member states, the RECs, and international partners who are able to address crisis situations before they become entrenched and too violent and take too many lives of our people. And indeed, sometimes we get attacked and criticized, but I think we are the only continent that quickly, in the developing world, that when there is a conflict, that quickly attends to it so that it doesn't rage on, as we have seen other conflicts raging on for years, destroying property, lives. So I think we are doing well, but we need to do more. However, we are deeply horrified by the tragedy Boko Haram continues to inflict on our people. Kidnapping young girls from school, torching villages, terrorizing whole communities, and killing. And I think we should all declare this state of affairs as unacceptable. Further, though it seemed like a localized group, now we see it venturing further into West Africa and into Central Africa. And I think the time to act is now, and to act collectively against this progressive threat. And of course, this will also contribute to the silencing of the guns by the year 2020, as the heads of state have agreed. And of course, I saw that the government of Chad is ready to assist Cameroon in this fight, but I hope the heads of state will discuss it in earnest and see what can be done. Of course, from our side, the Commission is having ongoing consultations with member states and RECs and other partners on this very important matter. Because I think we shouldn't look at it as just a threat to those countries. We should look at it, if it's not kept, it can be a threat to all of us. But we must also pay tribute to our men and women in uniform in the way they've tried to deal with Al-Shabaab and LRA and other conflicts, CAR and many others. And I actually think that we should have a monument at the AU for the people who have lost their lives in peacekeeping within the AU forces. Because I saw when we were commemorating the Day of the Armed Forces, we were laying the wreath in some makeshift thing here. And I think there must be a proper monument, and people who visit us must go and lay wreaths at that monument to acknowledge the contribution of the AU to peacekeeping and to peace in the world. So I hope that can be discussed and we can come with a decision. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the challenges, we should not lose sight of the progress we have made in areas of democracy, good governance, human rights. Throughout 2014, we had generally peaceful elections and successful transitions, and where contestations took place, they usually followed the legal framework and confine themselves to the courts, and that's how it should be. The outcome of these electoral processes reinforce our conviction that the involvement of the African citizenry in owning and taking responsibility for their destiny is critical to the realization of Agenda 2063 and a prosperous Africa. Excellencies, let me say something on Ebola. After some initial setbacks, our collective fight against the Ebola virus disease gathered momentum and is already showing results. I wish to express my profound gratitude to the heads of state, governments, to this council, to the RECs, civil society organizations, and especially fellow Africans for their rapid and effective response to the call for African health workers to be deployed in the 3 Ebola-affected countries. So far, we have over 800 medical professionals and health professionals in the field in these 3 countries, and we hope in the few weeks we will scale that up to 1,000 or more. But we have already begun to see a decline both in mortality and in new infections. We must pay special tribute to the young men and women who volunteered to this mission to Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, to demonstrate their spirit of Pan-Africanism and solidarity. Because the first volunteers were individual volunteers who quit their jobs and said, we are ready. And there are about 86 of them who are in the field who came in that way before member states started giving us health workers. And I think we must pay tribute to them, but to all the health workers. I also want to express thanks to the captains of industry and business leaders from various parts of Africa and businesses operating in the continent. We are working closely with them to mobilize resources to keep our health workers on the ground until the countries are officially Ebola-free. And in the medium term to long term, health resilience through the African Center for Disease Control will be important. We also want to thank the telecommunication companies on the continent who launched an SMS campaign at our request with the aim at reaching the ordinary Africans and seeking their contribution to the fight against Ebola. The campaign is going well and is now running in over 30 of our member states. This is a campaign that every single African country should be part of. I do not understand why it's only 30-something and not 50-something. Because the network operators have all agreed. The regulators are within the ambit of government and states. So we would plead with those countries that have not joined the SMS campaign to join it. So, because until Ebola, these countries are declared Ebola-free, we will still need the resources to keep the health workers there. I also just want to pay tribute to the Commission, especially the Commissioner for Social Affairs and its department and all the others that have worked with it to get this going. And to thank General Oketo, who's leading our entire program. And ECOWAS has also sent some health workers. But I also want to thank ECA and ADB, who also joined us in most of the activities around Ebola. Of course, as you know, the theme for this year is 2015 is the year of women's empowerment and development towards Agenda 2063. Over the last few days, in a series of pre-summit meetings of women, with participation from civil society, our ministers of gender, gender focal points of REX, our partners, and the ADB and UNSA, UN Women, UNDP Women met to consider the theme and the Beijing Plus 20 process. They discussed the practical actions required to ensure that during this focus year, we make a difference in the lives of many African women through practical initiatives in agriculture, agro-processing, in science and technology, innovation, education, business development, financial inclusion, health and reproductive rights, and many other campaigns against gender-based violence, sexual violence in conflicts, and child marriages. We must also do more this year to increase the representation of women in government, in the judiciary, and other public and private sector institutions, and their participation at the table in peace negotiations. I'm quite sure that though this is about women, but it is indeed about our entire communities and families. And so we are looking to you, our beloved dear brothers, to support this campaign and to support this year as you supported us in this theme. Now please support us in taking this theme forward. After this year, we should really have an irreversible momentum towards the emancipation of women on the continent. Last year, it was the year of agriculture and food security, and now we have a much better sense on what to do to improve. But this being the year of women, we must also be paying special attention to access to land, provision of infrastructure, irrigation, access to agricultural inputs, markets, finances for smallholder farmers, modernization of agricultural tools, and mitigation and adaptation of the climate change. I must say that I was very impressed. Yesterday I attended the meeting of the Africa Risk Capacity, where we are trying to manage risk, particularly against droughts. And that outfit, I think, needs to be looked at very closely. I was very impressed with their work. First, it's member states who are putting money, who are pooling their resources together to share risk. Secondly, that risk capacity is not working in parallel to government, but it is actually building capacity within governments. And thirdly, even before the drought starts, they've already paid out monies to the countries that are member states that have a looming drought, so that they can begin to mitigate the effects of that drought. So I think it's one of the institutions that are working well, that are indeed, if they continue in this way, are a success story for Africa. But this model can be also extended to other areas of risk, not only floods, cyclones, and even epidemics. So I think we should look at it very closely and see what lessons we can learn from that. In conclusion, we take inspiration from the resolve we have collectively demonstrated in responses of our people and in the formulation of Agenda 2063, in the fight against Ebola, and in the ongoing collective work to build a better life for all Africans. Excellencies, you will recall that during our emergency meeting in September, I think it was the Minister of Sudan who said very easily, oh, AU, why don't you give your budget to some of your budget to these countries? And at that point, we pointed to him what were the difficulties. But that inspired us to think creatively on how to get resources. And it inspired us to do the roundtable, to talk to the SMS to the network operators for the SMS. So I'm just saying your ideas are very helpful because we take them seriously. After that was said, we had to think, well, yes, we should be giving the budget, but we don't have. But how else can we do it? And this is what we've done. And so I really thank you and look forward to another very exciting discussions, ideas, and friendship amongst all of us. I thank you.